Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name's Alan Miller. I'm co-founder, one of the co-founders of the Together Declaration, and very pleased to be doing this session as one of our Together Talks live stream panels. What should the local elections mean for us? What should they mean in terms of democracy and freedom and the public engagement or not? What do they mean to you? Very important consideration. On the 5th of May, there will be the local elections across the UK in all 4 nations. And we're really pleased that we've got some fantastic speakers this evening. Really, I kind of think in many ways, you know, with the Together Declaration, a lot of people say they often feel politically homeless. There's a lot of independents that are standing now, new parties emerging and individuals, and it's an exciting time, particularly after the last couple of years that we've had. So we're really thrilled, and I'm going to very briefly introduce the speakers. You can obviously read up more about them, and they'll talk about their own parties and what they're doing if they are in a party. And what the format of the evening is going to be that we're going to have each of the speakers speak 3 minutes or so as a bit of a response to the general question. I'll ask a couple of questions of them, we'll get into a bit of the debate. Then we're going to go to Charlie Sandson as well, who's also standing in the first round of the audience, and June Slater. And then we're going to come out to you guys for some other questions, and we're going to go back and forth. So you kind of know the format now. We've done a few Together Talks. And as always, the idea is we can say pretty much anything, but we do it in a civil, grown-up way. Just to know that when you want to speak, you put your hands up if you can. Anna, who's doing brilliant work on the tech, will unmute people when they're going to speak. So that's the kind of way that we're going to do it. So
they can actually unmute themselves for now, Alan. I'm going to leave it like that. Okay.
Okay. All right. Great. Thank you. Okay. So this evening we've got speaking Valerie Gray, who is the chair of the Social Democrat Party, and will be sharing her thoughts on where we are now and what the SDP's role within it is in the upcoming elections and more generally. We've also got a changeover because originally Lawrence Fox was going to be speaking. Unfortunately, he can't speak today and sends his apologies. But we have got the very brilliant Harry Miller, who left people very inspired at the last time we spoke to him. So thank you, Harry, for joining from Reclaim. We've also got Jonathan Tilt, who is from the Freedom Alliance, who's they're standing a number of candidates across the UK as independents. And then in addition to that, we have David Kurten, to the Heritage Party, who many would have known, who was also on the GLA for some time and is a regular at demonstrations and protests, and many people will know him. We also have Alan Graves, who unfortunately his second substitution this evening. Not unfortunate that we've got Alan, we're very lucky we've got Alan, and he's a councillor from Derby and for Reform. So he's already in that position. Unfortunately, Richard Tice could not make it. But in many ways, it's really great to be it's going to be great to be speaking with you, Alan, because you'll have on the ground experience of what it's like to be a councillor and what it means and what these elections mean, which is really, really important. And we've also got June Mummery, who's had experience as an MEP and is also an expert on what's going on with the coastal regions and fisheries, and has been very vocal about that, and we're very pleased that we've got June with us. And also we have Marianne Overton, who's one of the people who runs the independent network, and there are many independents that's part of the independent network. I know in Hackney, I think there's about 11 just in Hackney. I'm obsessed with Hackney because it's where I'm based, but in any case, just to say there's a lot. And Marianne's also a vice chair of the Local Government Association and a councillor in Lincolnshire. So without further ado, I'm really pleased that we've got such a great panel. And I'm going to ask Valerie to start and kick off with some thoughts just on the question. Over to you, Valerie. Thank you.
Lovely. Thanks very much, Alan. Good evening, everybody, and thanks very much for the invitation to join you all and give us all a chance to have a chat. I think what I'll start with is just who are the SDP, because I suspect there are one or two out there who don't know about us. We've been in existence for quite a long time. We came into existence in the 80s when the Labour Party had a previous period of madness. And so you could describe us as a centre-left party, a moderate left, but some describe us as socially conservative as well. And I think that's not a bad description, because we're one of the few parties whose leader has no difficulty in describing a woman as an adult human female, for example. Now, we're a serious party. We have a whole raft of policies. You just need to go to our website to see what we have, including one on local governance. And in fact, I was up in Leeds last week assisting one of our candidates in Middleton in Leeds with his campaign. And I was interested in the sort of issues that he was campaigning on, because clearly they were local issues. And he had two big ones that he was campaigning on. The first one was on our environment and things like litter, graffiti, etc., and how to make the environment that we live in day to day a nicer place to live. And of course, local government has a part to play in this. And the other issue that he was having to deal with in Middleton was transport, buses to enable people to get in and out of Middleton. And so I think the important thing about local politics is it affects real down-to-earth issues that affect our day-to-day lives. So if you're hoping to change the world, it's not at a local election. You really, I think, and I would strongly urge voters out there to consider what the local issues are and who can best serve them. Now, the SDP is a small party, and unfortunately, we don't have candidates in every single ward or area that we'd like to stand. Only a few. We haven't got any great amount of money behind us. We're not beholden to industry or trade unions or anybody. So you won't necessarily find an SDP candidate, unfortunately, in your area. But if you do, speak to them, because they're local people and they are interested in local issues. The only other thing I would say in general terms is the first pledge in our policy on local government is about pay of executives in local government. We have a pledge that says no person in local government should be paid more than the Prime Minister. Now, as a matter of interest, in preparation for this meeting, I did a little bit of research into who the pay of our Chief Executive Officer here in Sussex, where I live. She actually works for both East and West Sussex, and her pay or package is £294,000 a year. The Prime Minister gets 161. So you can see there's quite a difference between the CEO of a county and the Prime Minister of a whole country. So that is another issue that we would campaign on. And I suspect my 3 minutes is up, Alan, and I don't want to claim too much time.
That was perfect. You exactly on 3 minutes, Valerie, and thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And you've raised some very big questions for us about what extent, if you want to change the world, you can't do it locally or not. And I'm sure a lot of people want to come back on that. But that was great. Thank you, Valerie. Harry, over to you, please.
Can you hear me? No problem.
Hear you.
Right. Excellent stuff. Thank you for inviting us on here. I strongly suspect that I will not take up the entire 3 minutes because...
Sorry, Harry, can I just interrupt? Can everybody mute themselves who's not speaking?
Are we good? Okay, right. Because A, we're not standing any candidates at all in this election, and B, we don't actually have any policies. So as a political party, I think we're quite unique in that regard. What we do have is a set of principles. Our principles, bearing in mind that Lawrence Fox and I are heavily involved with this party, around free speech. Who is that? Alan, who was that? Do we know?
Yeah, it was someone called Leanne, and I've muted her. Now, from now on, everyone's going to have to ask to unmute themselves because it's just too risky. Alan, you're muted, by the way.
Okay. I'm quite disappointed. Last time that I was doing this with Claire Fox, we were initially bombed with crazed voices, and then we were subject to a grand display of homosexual sex, which was somehow fed down the line. So none of that nonsense tonight, I'm hoping. Anyway.
No, hopefully not.
So anyway, I say we're not standing in the elections. We don't have any policies. What we do have is a set of principles. Principle number one is free speech, and I'm absolutely delighted to be on this Together event this evening with people who are not necessarily entirely in my tribe. For instance, the last speakers described themselves as sort of leftist, sort of centre leftist. Fantastic. I wish we had some proper far leftists on here as well, because the thing that I want more than anything is to resurrect the notion of political debate, where we don't disengage with people or no platform people because we consider their view renders them utterly evil. We engage with the people because we recognize that their view is fundamentally different. And we don't necessarily ascribe some moral failing to them because they don't happen to hold the view that we hold. And I would like to see that as well across even further right than we are now. Apparently we're a far right organization. Absolutely, we are not a far right organization. I think we're quite socialist in a lot of ways, in that the thing that we want more than anything is to have a frank discussion about social inequality. And the reason that we're not having a frank discussion about social inequality is because we're too busy trying to decide what a woman is, and whether a woman can have a penis, or whether we should kneel for Black Lives Matter, or whether the police should carry pride riot shields, and the nonsense around COVID and some of the nonsense around climate change. All of these things, as far as we're concerned, are distractions. What we really want to talk about is social inequality. Now then, at some point, we will stand candidates. We will probably stand candidates in the general election, but we will do it in a very local fashion. What we won't do is helicopter in, give somebody a badge, and then leave them. If we're going to stand a candidate, we'll spend the next 2 years getting to know them, getting to know the area. And then if they like us and we like them, we'll find somebody local and we will promote them. And we may do that with them being an independent, or they may choose to wear the Reclaim badge. But that will come at the general election.
Alan, unmute yourself now.
Yeah, I've done that. Yeah. Can we keep me unmuted? Is that okay throughout the period, please? Thank you. Thank you, Harry. Very clear and concise, and very important free speech, and we'll get into it with everyone and thrash it out. So next is Jonathan Tilt from Freedom Alliance, please. Over to you, Jonathan.
Hi, thanks for introducing and inviting me. I'm Jonathan Tilt, leader of the Freedom Alliance Party, which is a registered political party. We're not actually independents. We're a registered political party that was set up in the summer of 2020 to try and provide some resistance to the COVID hysteria and tyranny that we saw taking place, primarily focused initially in Yorkshire and the west of Scotland and South Wales. But we're standing candidates, 48 candidates across the country, and we do have a detailed, worked out manifesto and the range of policies. Essentially, I mean, our view is that we're in a war. The COVID hysteria was just the opening battle of that war, and it's been ground into a stalemate, primarily by those people who resisted the coercive vaccination program. But it's not over. There's going to be more battles that come, and this is happening because the debt-based monetary system that has been used to ensnare, enslave populations and whole countries for decades, if not longer, is coming to an end. There's a limit to how much you can steal from the future, and we've reached that limit, and we're on the precipice of a hyperinflationary collapse. What replaces that hyperinflationary collapse is the critical question, because it's quite clear that the World Economic Forum want to move to some form of digital enslavement, universal basic income, central bank digital currencies, tracking and tracing everyone and every step and every move and every penny you spend. That's their version of what comes next. But it doesn't have to be that. There are alternatives. It may be difficult to articulate exactly what those alternatives look like, but it's going to be genuine, it's going to be organic, it's going to be localized and very, very democratic. And that's the goal for the freedom movement, is to try and articulate that vision and to use whatever elections, local, national elections, whatever, and whatever platforms we're allowed to get on. And we do appreciate Together inviting us on this, because as a sort of anti-state narrative party, we are blocked and frustrated at absolutely every turn. So we do, Alan, appreciate the invite to this evening. But we have to articulate what that vision is going to look like. It won't look like local government looks like at the minute, but local government could well be a starting point for how we get to that. And that's why it's important to try and get people elected to councils, to influence and affect the direction of travel of those councils. But also the elections themselves give us an enormous opportunity to interact and interface with the 85% of the population that perhaps don't get what's coming, because we're all and this is part of the programming. We're all being pushed into our little echo chambers. We can talk to each other, but we can't talk outside of those echo chambers. I've spent most of this week on the streets of Barnsley and Wakefield, campaigning, canvassing, knocking on doors, talking to people, talking with people about the World Economic Forum. I hear what Valerie said about litter and environment and dog poo and potholes and all the rest of it, and I don't diminish and dismiss all of that. But for me, that is symptomatic of the collapse of the state and the society. The wider issues are the ways in which they're trying to enslave us. And as I say, we've been canvassing, knocking on doors, talking about the global reset and the Great Reset, and watching the blood drain from people's faces as we do that. But this is one of the few opportunities, one of the few chances we get to interact and interface with the rest of the population, if you like. The local press do cover us. We do get leaflets, hundreds of thousands of leaflets through doors, and we do get invited on platforms like this. And it is absolutely vital that the freedom movement, the democratic, non-discriminatory freedom movement, unifies itself, organises itself, and starts to offer a coherent and articulate vision of what a local democratic future could be like for everyone, one that works for we the people and not them, the parasites.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. Very clear. We'll come back to some of those questions about the broader questions and the specific local ones and what people think. I'd like to ask Marion Overton now to speak, please. Marion, over to you.
Thank you very much. I think I managed the unmute. Very good to see you all. Thank you very much for organising this event with such a significant range of views and political thinking, which is terrific. That's the way we can make the best decisions, is by thinking widely and making sure that everybody's thoughts and views are included. If we're going to make the right decisions, we certainly need to hear everybody. So thank you and well done for getting this organised. I'm Marianne Overton from the Independent Network. So although you kindly introduced me with some other hats, I'm not wearing those today. This is about supporting independent councillors and also if they stood as MP, but currently we're focusing on the local elections, and we have probably around 1,800 independent councillors, independent candidates and smaller parties standing, which we are keen to support. And that means that we will help with logistics and expertise. We've got a group where we have discussions every fortnight and pick up issues, templates for leaflets, all of those sorts of things, and generally making sure that people who are not tied to the big national parties have the confidence and the ability to make sure that their skills and talents are properly recognised by the electorate and they are able to be successfully elected. And we do have some currently elected, myself included, and others as well. So we have quite a good a number already elected, and we're certainly looking for more. So if you do have independent councillors standing in your area, I do hope you'll look closely at them. We are independent, as we don't have a manifesto, but what we do all agree is that we will focus on what local people need and want. And that you'd think was obvious, you'd think that was straightforward. Doesn't that sound like what your democratic representative ought to be doing? And so that's why we don't tie ourselves to any of the big national parties, and certainly not the Conservative, Labour or Liberal Democrats, just to make sure that we can actually listen carefully to local residents, and our thinking is focusing from that angle and not from any other agenda. So we do have a set of values. We're very keen supporters of the Nolan principles, which we've incorporated into something called the Bell principles, which includes the important addition of, yes, civility and upstanding and all of good qualities, but actually also making sure that we always put residents first in our thinking. So I think it's perhaps an old-fashioned idea that this is what your representatives should do, but we think it's a real winner. And certainly we have been working for probably more than 10 years now, and we have significant gains which have been very useful for our residents. Focusing on local issues, our members are all local. They are all engaged already in the community. So it might be running local community events, it might be running clubs, organisations, but what actually they can do a lot locally. But what we suggest is that they can do even more if they start to draw on the resources of the local councils and make sure that those local councils are shaping nicely to support what residents need and want, and not just carrying out any national party agenda. So it does mean that our members are very committed and very determined to work their socks off for their local communities. So if you've got one, you're lucky. Do talk to them, and you may well like to vote for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Marianne. Great. And I want to come back to you because I've got some questions about how that relates to the national stage as well, as I'm sure others do. Now, David Kurten, please. David, leader of the Heritage Party.
Hi, I've just unmuted, so can you hear me?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you for the invitation, Alan. Really lovely to be with you all tonight. Great. You probably know me. I'm the leader of the Heritage Party, and I was also on the London Assembly for 5 years, and my job was to question Sadiq Khan. And I was very, very glad to have the opportunity to be elected and to do that, because I could ask him some of the questions that no one else was willing to ask. I could ask him about his transgenderism ideas, which were complete nonsense. And I agree with the previous speakers when there are two sexes, male and female, and I'm very happy to describe a woman as an adult human female and so on. I could ask him about grooming gangs, but I could also ask him about the other things which related much more to people's everyday lives. And that's when local elections are really important, because I used to get loads and loads of questions from constituents in London asking me about things that I couldn't really deal with myself as an assembly member, but lots of things were about, can we have help with our housing association? Can we have help with our street lights? Can we have help fixing our potholes and those kind of things? And that's really what local politics and local elections are supposed to be about. And the councillors in your local council are so important for people's everyday lives and things that affect people's communities. Sadly, the turnout in local elections is really, really poor every time. It's 30 to 40%. And I would like to see far, far more engagement in local elections up to the level of Westminster elections and beyond, because it really is important for dealing with those things. As for the Heritage Party and what we would bring to local elections, we have a full manifesto, and there's lots and lots of principles in our manifesto. But one of them, which is key for local areas, is financial responsibility. And I think most people understand that local councils all over the place are wasting people's money, spending them on big white elephant projects like a new art centre or something, or statues in the town. My local town has redone the paving in the town centre 10 years ago, and they're redoing it again this year. It didn't need to be done 10 years ago. It doesn't need to be done now. And it's a massive waste of money. So that money could be spent on libraries and parks and roads and lighting and all those things that people really need in their local area. So that's one reason why to get involved in local elections, to stand as a candidate and to vote. But the other reason, of course, is that whatever you think, however local it is, people take it as as an indication as to confidence and what people think about the parties which are in Westminster, particularly the government and the regime that we've got. So this is going to be seen as a verdict by the electorate on Boris Johnson's record. And frankly, it's absolutely terrible. And I think people are going to be very, very right to give them a bit of a kicking at the polls next week, because we've had these horrible, terrible 2 years where, first of all, they've had lockdowns, then masks and vaccines and vaccine passports, and it's not over. And I would agree there with what Jonathan from the Freedom Alliance says. We've got to keep fighting, because they want to bring in digital identity and social credit, and that's coming down the line. And we've got the World Health Organization pandemic preparedness treaty, which is going to give sovereignty away to the World Health Organization, and all these things are happening. And this is part of it needs to be part of what we think about in voting for these local elections as well. So we're going to be telling people on the doorstep about local issues, but we're also going to be giving people an opportunity for change in the country. I mean, I'm the Heritage Party, so we would say to restore our heritage and to get back to the free and beautiful nation that we once were, that we should be again, and what people deserve to live in. Right. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you very much, David. And when we come back, if you want to say how many candidates you're standing and things like that for different people, I think people want to know as well, would be good. We're now going to go to Alan Graves. As I said, Alan's the councillor for Reform, is the leader of Reform in Derby. And so over to you, Alan. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for the invitation. My name's Alan Graves. I'm a senior member of Reform UK, and I'm also the leader of Reform Derby. I'm going to say something quite controversial here to start with. The first thing is that in local elections, I want all the voters to vote for any of these parties represented here today. What is important is that what we don't do is vote for mainstream parties. That is the problem in local politics. That is the problem in national politics. That is what is problem with politics per se. So I'm very much about independence. I think our party is about being independent. It's about being whip free. So all our members don't have to follow any party dogma. We can decide on local issues with local people. So whatever is of an interest to the local electorate is what we should be voting for. So on that basis, we are actually more democratic. These are about local elections this year. So this year, we're going to be fighting on local issues, and local issues are different in every area. And people need to understand that you need local people in those local areas sticking up for them. None of our members are career politicians. At the end of the day, we're all small parties. We can't be career politicians. So we are not career politicians. We are ordinary people engaged in politics. And I think that's a very big difference. From Reform UK's perspective, we have a national infrastructure. We have regional managers across the country. We have a complete structure in every county. We are standing several hundred candidates across the country. Here in Derby, there are 17 seats standing for election, and we have 17 candidates. This is how important it is. In Bolton, there are 20 seats up for election, and there are 20 candidates. It's important in local elections to deal with the things that bother people locally. So, for instance, I think I'm right in saying that across the country, roads are a big problem. Roads are crumbling. In my council, we spend £3 million a year on repairing the roads. The officers tell us we need 7 million, and we can all see where that is going to head eventually. There's going to be no roads. Social services are a problem. I agree with a lot of things that Marianne said. I mean, she talks about her independence, the independence that she represents. But what we've done is we see ourselves as independents. I'm actually a member of the Independent Network as a Reform Derby councillor. So we do have some relationships there. But what we do is we formed ourselves as a group, as a party, so that people can rely on a bigger group in Derby. So here in Derby, we have 6 councillors at the moment out of 51, and we're growing each year. And I think really that's, oh yeah, the only other thing I wanted to say is we also support the Vote Power, Not Poverty campaign, because I think one of the biggest issues this year is going to be poverty. I mean, we've all seen the rise of the food banks, but that is going to become very critical around the country when the fuel bills hit and people can't afford to pay, and they've got to decide what they're going to spend their money on. And it's going to be terrible for the local people out there. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much, Alan. And then finally, I'm going to ask June Mummery to speak before I ask some questions and then come out to our key invited speakers in the audience first. But June Mummery, June, you've got a lot of experience talking to people in the fishing industry and locally, etc. So yeah, over to you. Thank you.
Right. So good evening, everybody. Thank you, Alan. Thank you together. And most of all, thank you for your viewers that I hope are listening in tonight to us all. Right. Well, wow. Listening to you guys. Yeah, I agree with most of the things I've heard. And where do I follow? Well, I've always got this thing that, you know, the majority of people in life, the average person, they want to leave school, get a job, fall in love, get married, and have just a lovely, great life. And that trust that we must have in our government to ensure that for them. So the question that I was asked and looked at and whatever was local governments, local elections, are they important? Of course they are. They're more important than ever, because that lot in Parliament are not doing the correct jobs for the people at this time. So with local elections, we have education, police, social care, infrastructure, planning, refuse, recycling, local issues, parks, beaches, so many things is in that local bubble. Now that's the important thing for me, local. And the people that we should be seeing elected in these jobs are local elected people, are actually local people representing local people. And that is where that's what I would like to see, people thinking more locally. I mean, that's great to bring in, you know, all the hassle we've got with our Parliament at the moment, but let's all be very mindful about where we're going to be. For example, coastal communities. We're all aware they got sold out. You know, we didn't take back control of our waters and the resource. So the aspirations and opportunities for these people have gone. So now, more than ever, people have to get out and vote locally to have that voice and to obviously send a message to the parties we have, the current parties that are there. So to me, these elections will be so important. And you know, obviously I haven't got them in my area, but there are 17, Hartlepool, Hull, Plymouth, Southend-on-Sea, Portsmouth, Colchester, Castle Point, places like that, South Tyneside. So we've got lots of coastal communities that people have got to get out and vote and send a message. And something that I have been seeing, if I've got time just to mention, Alan, is some councillors have actually signed a declaration that they will, especially in the Channel Islands and different places, that they're actually signing declarations to say, we will support this, we will support that. I've looked up today, I was looking through at the, I do endorse the campaign, Respect My Sex If You Want My Ex. And yet again, this is another warning shot for these May local elections. So I think that all the big stuff is so important, but we should never take our mind off the local issues that towns, villages and cities have. Thank you, guys.
Great, thank you very much. And thank you to everyone. I suppose the question that I've got to the panel, first of all, is we've just gone through 2 years of lockdowns and restrictions and impositions. We know that there are real challenges about heating or eating that came way before any discussion about the Ukraine crisis. It's now compounding. Some people have referred to some of the inflation. In the context of what that means nationally, but also locally, it has enormous implications. And I suppose the first question is, if I'm watching this and you're on a live stream, people are watching thinking, well, we're saying to people that are Together signatories, we've got 5 key things we're saying, ask of your candidates. One of them is free speech. One is where they stood on lockdowns, would they do them again? Digital ID, where they were on mandates and passports, but digital ID, privacy and rights, kids jabs, right? And so we get some clarity on that. But the relationship between what can be done locally in the context of what's happening with the cost of living crisis is going to be in forefront of people's minds. And so I suppose I'm going to throw that over, because I think Marianne said something very interesting, which was that it was about, independence and what representing the residents locally. But I wonder what that means in terms of an all-round concerted effort and a national relationship between national politics, central government funding, and then local politics, and how that works. What does that really mean on the ground if you've got lots of independents everywhere? Is there kind of a joined up way of handling that or not? Marianne, please.
Thank you. Each individual does make up their own mind about what they want to focus on, having talked to their residents. So, we've said that already. But there are things that I think we can unite on generally for everybody. And I think you're right about the issues you've picked in terms of fuel poverty and what can be done, because all of these issues have a really important local impact. So you walk out your front door and you've got roads, trees, parks, then you go to work and you've got businesses that need supporting, you've got leisure that needs supporting. All of these things are actually in the aegis of the councils. They're not national. But what we do need to do, and I think we all unite on, is to focus on making sure that local government is properly supported, so that government does make sure we have the right funds and powers to make sure that our councils can do the job we need them to do. It's certainly the most cost-effective part of government, and certainly the most effective and the most trusted by our residents, because we're closest. We are part of the community. We live and breathe the same issues that our neighbours do. And that's what we're fighting to improve at all levels. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to ask Alan Graves. Alan, just a similar point, but what is Reform's position on who pays for the cost of living, and in the context of what's happened in the last 2 years? Just let us know what that means locally, if you would. Alan Graves?
In a local sense, the cost of living isn't really a major part of local politics. In local politics, we just apply the council tax banding. Now, one of the things that we're very clear about with council tax is that we should be a low tax party, and the way that the government, it's actually started back in Tony Blair's time, where he introduced what they call a ratchet effect within council tax. So what that means is that the local council is expected to raise more tax than the government gives in subsidies to the council, and each subsequent parliament has kept that way. So it looks like when they give money, when the national parties give money, when the parliament and government give money, it looks like that the local council, they're giving the money to the local councils, but actually the local council have to raise more money to stand still, or that's the way it's portrayed to them. But I still think what we should do is keep council tax extremely low. I mean, here in Derby last year, they raised council tax by 5%, and this year by 2%. I mean, that is a ridiculous situation for local people, especially if you think about Derby, we have over 80% of our houses are Band A. So that then reflects on the sort of income that the majority of people in Derby earn. And therefore, every small increase that happens affects those people much more than say the rich people we've got amongst us today. So in a local sense, when you say who pays, what we shouldn't be doing is putting all that onto the very low paid people in our country.
Okay, thank you. Harry, I suppose a question that a lot of people have been asking, I know they've asked me and we've had that, is we've got new organisations, new parties, a lot of people that share many similar views. There's a lot of different parties that perhaps could get together. It's a tough question. I mean, why do you think it is? And in terms of Reclaim supporting certain people, is there an argument for more people getting together? Or are there very clear different ideas about what should be done? Just some thoughts on that, because I know a lot of people have asked.
Yeah, it simply won't happen. It's a nice idea, but in reality, it won't happen. We have very different policies, really, when we get down to it. For instance, we have very little in common, I think, with the SDP, particularly around energy, etc. I don't really understand how Reform and the SDP have hooked up, because again, their actual policies seem to me to be very, very different. What we can all agree on is that it's great to have multiple voices. It's great to have multiple policies and multiple opinions, and then let the people decide. Now, again, we're a small party. We're all small parties, and we've accepted that there's not a cat in hell's chance that we will ever form a government. We'll not make an opposition. So what do we do once we've recognised that reality? Well, what we intend to do with Reclaim is to create a cultural wave, to create cultural influence and generate a cultural political shift. And we'll do that because we have conviction, we have cash, we have charisma, and we have a fantastic media channel, which we're building. We have the best social media team, I think, in Britain. And I think we're going to be able to help shape the narrative at a national level by doing that. And then locally, because we agree that potholes and trees and the way people live when they step out of their front door is also important. So what we will do is we will get behind local candidates. When we find them, if they like us and we like them, we'll get behind them and say, you know your area, you know what policies do you want? And providing you can stick with our principles, you can have whatever policy you like.
Right. Very clear. Good. Thank you. Jonathan, I want to ask you, because you put some big points about the big ideas about supranational organizations, but the potential impact they have, and getting out, but doing it locally and having an impact nationally. What do you do just practically when you go to the door and people say, well, my big concern is how I'm going to pay my heating bills, or where the police when you need them? How do you sort of navigate that? And do you? It's a question.
I mean, our focus is on the wider war that we're fighting here. But I mean, all of our 48 candidates are local to the areas that they're campaigning in, and none of them are professional politicians. So we share that with the bulk of the other parties along here. Just briefly on the inflation. I mean, inflation has been caused, whether deliberately or not, by the excessive debt financing and the printing of money to support the state and the state narrative. I stood in the Batley by-election last June, and I was ridiculed for predicting that petrol would go to £2 a litre within 6 months. Now, I was out by 3 months, but I wasn't that far out. And YouTube, who wouldn't let me have a video stating that at the time because it was a conspiracy theory, have since relented and accepted that it's not a conspiracy theory. So we've been predicting this inflationary wave for 2 years now. And it's, if you print money to pay for non-productive services, which is how furlough and coronavirus has been financed, then it will come back and bite you as inflation 18 months, 2 years down the road, and that's what's happening. So we absolutely have to stop doing that. In terms of providing immediate and instant relief, because I mean, it is desperate out there. The fuel bill increases I'm hearing about are horrific. People are having their fuel bills going up by factors of 4 and 5 a month. It's just utterly unaffordable. And the next crisis that's coming is mortgages, because 10-year gilts have gone up by 300% over the last 9 months. That is going to feed through into mortgage rates next, I'm afraid. There are things that can be done to provide immediate relief. I mean, council tax across England, excluding Wales and Scotland, raises about 40 billion a year. That is the same as the money that the government wasted on track and trace. So you can get rid of nonsense like that and certainly alleviate council tax bills for people. I mean, our policy is to abolish it for everybody below Band D, which I think, as Alan pointed out, is the vast majority of people anyway. So there are some simple, quick fixes there that can be done. But these are all addressing the symptoms. The cause is too much money being printed to finance government.
Okay, thank you. Now I'm going to come to David, and then I'm going to ask June Mummery one thing. Then I'm going to come to Charlie and June Slater, and I'm going to come out to you guys. So I want to start seeing hands. There's a lot of people I know want to speak, and it's a lot of questions. But David, Kurten, I mean, you talked at the start. You've got clear experience of holding on the GLA, the London Assembly, holding people accountable that are, like the mayor that was elected, and looking at the context of things like the plan, the planning directorate for London, and a range of other things. So obviously, the mayor has control over the police and other things. In terms of these local elections, firstly, we'd like to know, I mean, our heritage standing people in places, or if not, who you would support, whatever. But the role that can be done in terms of raising these issues and engaging people, and because you were quite vocal about why you should go from 30 or 40% to have more people take a stand or get involved in it. And surely that's about them feeling like there are some consequences, or their voice matters or counts. So how would you present that to people to get them inspired and do that in the context of your experience and what it means?
Yeah, thanks, Alan. Well, we're a new party, so we don't have a vast number of candidates this time. We've got 18 candidates, mostly in England, but we've got a couple in Wales, which is exciting. And we've also got one candidate standing in the Northern Ireland Assembly, which is fantastic as well, because that's sort of a slightly, different election going on in Northern Ireland. Obviously, with the things that we talked about, cost of living and so on, with a small number of candidates, there's nothing we can actually do to take a majority in a council this year. But by voting for us, it sends a message that you're not happy with the powers that be and the parties that be. And I basically see all the old parties that are in Parliament, Tory, Labour, Lib Dem, Green, as basically doing the same thing. They're committed to the World Economic Forum programme. They all wanted lockdowns. They all wanted vaccines and so on. And they're all responsible together for the cost of living crisis, because they've just been printing more money with impunity, with on and on. And there's lots of different things that have led to that. But basically, if we don't live within our means, if we borrow more than we spend, then that's going to lead to inflation, a little bit like what Jonathan said. So, we have to actually put the message out and be honest about these things and say, well, what we mustn't do is create more inflation by doing more spending and more borrowing. We have to live within our means. And that means at a national level, and also means at a local level. So we got to be honest about some of the things. The whole climate alarmism has been a nightmare, because loads of money has gone into inefficient technologies, and we've shut down coal and gas, which are efficient. That's led to the massive increase in energy prices, the whole furlough thing that's been going on, and the sanctions on Russia, which are being pumped by the mainstream media, have backfired on us in the West, and that's actually causing an increase in the cost of living as well. So there's all these kind of things together. The main parties have just done the wrong thing over and over and over and over again, and you've got to vote for somebody else, otherwise there's never going to be any change.
Okay, thank you. June Mummery. June, you've had experience being as an MEP and seeing some of what goes on there in terms of bureaucracy and accountability or not and everything. In the context of local politics and local councils and constituencies and wards, I mean, what are people saying on the ground to you, June, and what's your thoughts? And what do you think are most pressing for people that people really want answers on?
Well, I live in a coastal town, and we have been sold out. And like I said, and I've said it to other people, I personally think we need a coastal community party. There's 186 seats, and even if we get 20, 10, 5, we need a few seats in Parliament to make a change. That's the only way you will ever change anything, is getting those bums on seats. I can talk all day long, we can do this, we can do that, but unless you have a platform, you're out. When I was an MEP for that short time, I had a platform. I made a difference with electric pulse fishing, with actually taking us out. It was wonderful. But now, without the help of the people like all of yourselves, you Alan, have been wonderful, Reclaim and other parties, Reform. Without you guys, I'd probably be nothing. And without the social media. So to me, at this present time, I am very concerned for coastal communities. You know, we are an island, whether it's aggregates, oil and gas, energy, or fishing, we should be harvesting from our ocean. You know, if you look at the wind farm and my MP and all the other MPs and our Prime Minister, he loves sucking on that wind milk. Well, that's fair enough, but the majorities of those companies are foreign. I mean, Scottish Power, which is off the coast where I live, is owned by the Spanish. Most of the jobs that come from the ocean are the Danes or the Dutch or the Germans. You know, we have all this water around our island and we're not using it. And above all, it's a food resource, an extremely important resource that we should be catching and selling to the rest of the world. So, you know, at the end of the day, Alan, I wish I had as much, I've got the passion, but then I need know-how and people, and I really do think we do need a coastal community party.
Okay, thank you. Valerie, you described the SDP as kind of being sort of socially conservative, but from the left. The idea of people's wages and what people are paid, I don't know how that was possible, sorry guys. The idea of what people are paid in the UK, along with the cost of living crisis, we've seen a very sluggish, since the 70s really, but the increase in people's pay in the UK has been limited, and it would seem that the idea of development and growth and investment, both at the local level in terms of plans and implementation and resolutions linked to the national level, should be something that would be done, not just in the electoral cycle, but where does the SDP stand on that in terms of creating economic development? And also maybe some people on the left would have argued in the past but just, you know, forget left or right maybe now, but just ordinary people, their pay and what that means, not just people that are high execs and if they shouldn't get too much, but just wealth creation for everyone.
Well, it's interesting you to say that, Alan, because today I revisited a very good video that we put out a little while ago with William Clouston, our leader, when he talks about indifference, how the recent governments in this country have been indifferent to things going on here. They're quite happy to know the price of everything and the value of nothing. They sell our industries to anybody who wants to buy them, rather than look after and sort of work on providing support for our own industries. And June has really just talked about that a little while ago. So what the SDP would like to see is an end to this indifference, a care for our own industries, investment in our own industries, protection where necessary for our own industries, rather than this laissez-faire attitude where the person with the most money buys whatever's for sale. It's not the way to increase wealth for this country. And I always get rather fed up with politicians when they talk about, oh yes, it's a great growth in GDP, as if that's the be all and end all of things. But if people's salaries aren't going up, their wages aren't going up with an increase of GDP, that's no good to the British citizen at all. So I think we need to end this indifference about what goes on in our own country. We need to support our own industries, and therefore we will see wages rise, more employment for people in this country. And I don't want to go into immigration and all those sorts of things, but these have impacts on this. And I mean, a very fine example of indifference is housing in this country. Governments right from Blair onwards have been indifferent to providing housing for people in this country. It's a scandal what's happened to our housing in this country. We used to provide houses for people who couldn't afford to buy their own. We've stopped doing that. And the idea that the market can somehow answer everybody's problems is simply not true. I mean, and housing is a brilliant example where that's patently failed to provide what we need for our citizens. Governments have a role to play. And I'm not saying that government should do everything, but there is a role for government and there is a role for industry. And it's that blend of the two, this mixed economy that the SDP supports. But I'd like to go back, if I may, to a point Harry made where he said that we can't work together. I disagree. I disagree quite strongly with that point. I listened to what Alan said. I agreed with every single thing he said. Now, reform and SDP, you actually mentioned, Harry, can't work together. That's not true. There are lots of synergies between us all here. We can find agreement in all sorts of areas. And one of the things that we, in our policy for local government, talk about is proportional representation, something that all small parties should support. And if we are to have proportional representation, which I think is a good thing, nationally and locally, we have to work together, because proportional representation automatically means you need to compromise and work together. That's a good thing. And I never understand why people are frightened of talking to people, coming to agreements with other people. You don't have to agree with every single thing another party has to say, but you can still find ways that you can work together. And I think in local government, I agreed absolutely with what Alan said. Don't vote for the duopoly. They've been in power too long and they're not governing the country very well. And we've got a lot of alternatives now. So my message to people out there now in the local elections particularly, vote for people who care about you, not for the duopoly who just wants to remain in power regardless, with no care for people at all.
Okay. Right, well, thank you. So I'm going to, that's very useful. And I want to hear what people who are on the live, on the Zoom thing, you can put your hands up in a minute. And then obviously, if you're on the live stream, you can't ask questions, but you can respond and we'll be taking comments and we're going to continue with it. So I want to come firstly to Charlie Sandson. Charlie, people will recognize him probably if you were watching TV a while ago during the whole lockdowns and restrictions and the impacts. He was in the Conservatives and he resigned. He came out, he took himself out of the party, left the party, and is now standing as an independent locally. And I've asked Charlie just to say why he's standing and on what position, on what basis, and what led to that decision, what's important for him locally in Essex and Basildon, and perhaps a couple of thoughts that he encounters from people when he's canvassing. So Charlie, first, over to you, please.
Hi, good evening. Thank you very much, Alan. Yeah, you mentioned something about why I left the Conservative Party, and I think that two words that come to mind in my estimation of why I did it is to do with honesty and integrity. I think that a lot of politicians don't have much of it, if I'm honest, some of the ones that I've come across at least. Now, when I quit the Conservative Party, I was the chairman of an area called the South Basildon Conservatives. It was a branch within a federation, and I was asked by the BBC to come on and talk about Plan B and how I felt about it. And it was during that interview that I decided to quit live on air, which is why I went around all the other news stations like Sky and GB News and had articles written about me in Breitbart and The Independent after that. And I made the news not because I said something crazy or completely extraordinary. I made the news because I spoke up against a major national party live on the BBC and spoke for millions with absolute conviction. And I mean that, with absolute conviction. And I think that's what people respect. And since I did that, I've had calls from nearly every party to kind of work with them, and phone calls from people that I won't mention here out of respect to say that they agree with me. But the tipping point for me was when you had 1 week, you had a minister in Parliament, whether it be Sajid Javid or Nadeem Zahawi, saying that the vaccine was not made for children, and then the following week saying, oh, hang on a minute, we might give it to your kids. And I was like, nah, I'm not playing that game. And I tried my hardest to have conversations with MPs within the Conservative Party to really get them to understand my fears and my trepidation with moving forward the party, because I saw it as tyrannical. And I know it's a strong word to use, but I do stand by that as well. Even back then, people said that's a bit over the top, Charlie. I said, I really don't think it is, because once they do this, what will they do next? When precedents get set in politics, they're very hard to overturn without revolution or conflict, as we've seen in history. So moving forward to the upcoming local elections on May the 5th, David Kurten touched on something which resonated with me intently, which is financial responsibility. Where I live in Basildon, we've got a serious problem regarding the local plan. Now, for those watching, the local plan is something which governs how and where buildings are going to get built in your town. And the Conservatives pulled it a little while ago through fear of losing seats in their core areas in the borough. This has exposed our town now to spurious planning applications with no line of defence to push back against them. So with my campaign last year with the Conservatives, we campaigned against tower blocks, and we saw them as negative for the town centre. Since coming into power, the Conservatives have used their majority planning committee to vote and agree with tower blocks in our town, which the current leader said will create, and I quote here, ghettos in our town, which makes me wonder why they've done what they've done. In one meeting in particular I attended, there was an email shown to me, and I made a speech thereafter asking why the Conservatives were asking councillors to effectively look favourably upon developer applications, given our campaign. And in my final meeting before I officially left the party, I called for the entire planning committee to their face to get sacked, or for the leader of the party to stand down. All the personnel, needless to say, have remained in post, minus one councillor who took a moral stand and resigned. So this campaign moving forward, and why I think independents have the best opportunity now, is because we've had 2 years on a national level, examples of how you have no honesty and no integrity and flip-flop politics based on pollsters and what some advisor whispers in that area and what another advisor whispers in that one. And even on a local level now, you've got councillors whom I was friends with for years, who I'm now politically against completely. Obviously, morally, I'm still Conservative, but the way that they've gone about their business is so against what we stood for that independents now can really tap into that local community and say, look, I live with you. I'm here with you. You know, give us a shot. What do you have to lose? Because you voted for them last time and they've stitched you up. And I think if people can really connect on a personal level with their constituents, but not treat them like constituents, treat them like they're your friends. That's how I think you move forward. And that's what I'm doing currently now to try and win a seat on Basildon Borough Council. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you, Charlie. But just if you do, I'm saying when you do win the seat, but if you do win that seat, but what are there particular policies specifically? Because it does, one question that comes up is that everyone can be independent, but there could be a range of different things. And has it gone the idea that you have some political, ideological views around certain things, or is that all just gone now and it's just all different, a multitude of different things in the localism? I mean, what's your thought on it?
I mean, morally, I still stand with all the things that you and I have discussed with in the past, and there's a few people on this call tonight which I know personally that I've discussed this with. Morally, I'm still against COVID passports, against mandatory vaccination, definitely force free speech. But on a local level, you know, we locally here, you can work with other parties. I mean, I can't remember which person said you couldn't, but you really can, because since I've left the Conservative Party, I now have conversations with the Labour Party, the Reform Party, the independents around here, different independent groups, and I still keep in touch with certain Conservatives, but you can find justification to work with other people if it's for the greater good. And I don't actually feel like the divisions that are created by party politics, they're all superficial. Last year, I came for the Labour leader of the council, metaphorically speaking. I came for his throat last year in the local campaign. But me and him get along like a house on fire. And there are many things that we agree on. And there's many things that we can now talk about moving forward on how to bring the town into what I would consider prioritisation of what people need. People don't need to be worried about, you know, a velodrome, which is what one councillor spoke about, which is a professional cycling rink. People want lower council tax. They don't want to have to pay through the nose for their council tax. And I think our chief executive in Basildon, I think he's on about 200 grand. I mean, it's incredible the amount of money that goes on these people, but I think people want lower council tax most of all.
Thank you, Charlie. Now, June Slater, now many of you will know June, who has a massive following on social media. She's very vocal and very courageous. And I always know that while she's very friendly, you got to watch it, because if you could get in trouble with June and she'll tell you exactly what she thinks, which is what's great about her. Now, Charlie's just given us a really interesting view that I think if people talked about politics today, I'm not sure that many people would say that about, you know, the ability to work with different parties. It's quite encouraging in some ways. I suppose the question is, though, do any parties anymore have ideas about the economy that are very specific to them, the old Keynesian ideas, or, you know, Adam Smith, or is it all now just about personalities? Do we need more? Can this be done better? And June, what are people saying around your area? And I know you've kind of canvassed a lot for the needs of local people.
Well, obviously I've got quite a big reach on social media, and it's a new tool for us, because until recently, up until say 5 years ago, it was just for socialising mainly. Just to give you, for instance, of the reach that I've got, because I do answer all my messages as well as running the pages that I've got. In March to the end of April, to the 24th of April, I reached 8.5 million people. 8.5 million. A paid for TV channel would be happy with that. And one person, I don't get paid, I don't make any money. I've never spent 1 penny on building my presence up. I've got 145,000 followers altogether who feel part of it, because I respond to people on threads. I did help an awful lot of people during lockdown. I did work that MPs should have been doing, who took their 7,000 quid and cleared off. We never saw them. I had to get someone cancer treatment, get someone's ashes back from a funeral director, talk to a family in Australia whose father went into, well, he went blind and his wife got took into care. There were terrible, terrible things going on. There's one central thing here, and that is every single person I've dealt with in national politics. Let's just leave the local one for a minute. Every single person I deal with in national politics is interested in making a name for themselves on the world stage. They don't care about us. You must take that as absolute gospel. They do not care about you. A country that's spending money on wind farms, putting sails on them made from fiberglass that need a helicopter to fly over with antifreeze, that they have to be buried in the land, they don't biodegrade. That is not a country that's bothered about you. A country telling you to buy an electric car that starts at about £50,000 is not a country that's bothered about you. It's a country that's bothered about plowing money in and looking good on the climate stage. Carry on that thinking into local council level. When COP26 went on locally, there was a mini COP26 in Manchester. Not only were they talking rubbish in Glasgow as private jets queued up to land, and as Tesla cars are having to be charged up on hired generators, generate from normal power grids. Not only did all that go on, but councillors were imitating it, because the councillors are telling us that councillors, when I say council, I mean the big parties, not the independents. The councillors are telling us they've got the right science. Well, they've got the science that the government's providing, because that's putting the government's narrative forward. I believe very strongly that local people and on a national level, that small parties should work together. I've been trying to get this message across for 4 years. Sadly, the leader of the SDP, who I tried to contact through a mutual friend, didn't really want to talk to me, because I'm just social media. So I don't think they understand the benefit of being involved with someone like me, because I'm actually listening to the people. I'm not for any particular party. I totally respect Lawrence Fox, because he's one of the few people that's got into politics. He's basically scuppered his own lucrative career to make a difference to people. Normally you get the Kinnocks coming into politics, and they come into politics at the stage, they come to make a living, to make money from being in politics. If people are coming into politics and getting better off after they've arrived, there's something wrong with that system. So when you get someone like Lawrence Fox, who's also got funding, which is very important, and he sees the sense in trying to work for the people, and you yourself, Alan, who have worked tirelessly now for months, going to meetings, having a say in what's going on, I can quite categorically say that you and together have been instrumental in stopping one of the biggest, most detrimental and intrusive decision-making that this government that's in power have ever had. To actually mandate that something goes inside your body that you don't want, when you've got a greasy politician, and they are greasy, they're not trustworthy, it's not a profession you go to trust. politicians are not trustworthy. They have to prove that. Yeah, I haven't met any trustworthy ones because, as one of the speakers said earlier, one week it's an adult drug, the next week they're sticking it in the arms of children. Now, where did that come from? When you have a country that never gets a mention on mainstream media, Sweden, never gets a mention because they didn't go around doing what we did. They didn't lock everybody down. They didn't create laws. They didn't fine a gym owner £54,000. They didn't do any of that. And they've come out of this as well as anybody else.
But can I ask you
down to a council level,
yeah.
You've got councils now imitating big government. How is that beneficial to local people? You've got property. Let's look at the council tax, because really the council tax, it's like, what excuse can we come up with to take more money off the public? That's what it should be labelled up as. Because what always amazes me is your council tax goes to your education, your police, your roads, your hospitals. Those are all services that human beings use. So when you get a small landlord, say a landlord who's got 20, 30 properties and he's got 4 empty ones, but he's still got to pay council tax, how is his empty properties being a burden on the system? Because there's nobody in them using all those systems that's geared for human people. The house, the dwelling doesn't use them. So we've now got this council. It doesn't matter which one it is. It doesn't matter whether it's Lancashire County Council, Manchester, Liverpool. You've got these councils that have the same mindset as big government, which is how to claw more and more money in off the people. And they have their priorities all wrong. Lancashire County Council spent something like 9 million. You can correct me on this if I'm wrong. Well, they upgraded all the laptops and PCs and mobile phones to better stuff. It's about 3 years ago. And yet we've got grass growing out of gullies in the road, and we flood in different places because the gully wagon that used to come round once a week in winter comes round once a year, and it's loaned out to different councils. So they've got all the priorities wrong. Okay. Most councils have got priorities.
Just to jump in there, because we've got a lot of questions coming in now as well, and hands are going up. If you have a question, one question to the rest of the panel, what's the one question? Short one, just put it to them. What do you think? And then we can, or when we come back for the round, they can answer that if you do have one.
Well, how do any of you intend to interact with the people locally? Because it's going to take, it's hard work, it's spade work, it's footwork, it's knocking on doors, ringing bells. And the other thing, are you interested in the way I've done it, which is not spending any money? Because if you're not spending any money, you're not spending people's money. Yeah, there are ways you can get round your constituency without spending shed loads of money on livery, labelling up, free pens, mugs. You don't need to do any of that. You just need to have your candidate connect with the people that are going to vote for him. And do what I did during lockdown. Do the work. Just do the work. Will you do the work without being elected? Will you do the work for the people before you're elected, like Alan's done?
That's perfect. Good question. Thank you, June. So we've got questions. I can see Nigel Jacklin, who's been very involved in local politics and also in challenging lockdowns. He helped together a lot. And also Jeffrey Peel. Similarly, I can see hands up there. I'm going to come to them and there's a couple of questions that are coming up in here that I'm going to put to them as well. I want to say thank you to Marion, who's going to have to leave. But thank you to Marion. So firstly, Nigel Jacklin.
My question is really, how can we help people get elected? We've got a week to go. There are over 2,000 candidates standing in the parties on this Zoom and independent candidates. We've published a guide to them on the Democratic Network. It doesn't actually matter whether they're standing where you live. You can still support independent people on social media. We kind of need to get a message out to the Labour and the Tories that they haven't represented us and we want some different people in. So what can people do to support?
Very important question. Jeffrey Peel.
Yeah, it was just really a comment, and I would absolutely endorse everything that June said. I was a councillor for a few years in Dacorum Borough Council in southwest Hertfordshire, Hemel Hempstead area. And the thing that struck me about local government and about councillors, particularly the party elected councillors, was that there was no real passion on show. Typically, these people were glorified bureaucrats, and they worked excessively closely with the local government civil servants, essentially. So they were essentially yes people or no people, depending on which benches they sat. And I think there is an opportunity here on the doorstep to get some of the passion over that we've seen in the campaign groups, because I think people at council level can actually implement change in a very direct way, largely because particularly unitary authorities, they operate on the basis of the committee structures. So the people who are on the committees tend to have the most power. And obviously getting onto the influential committees is absolutely critical. And particularly during this period when we have seen, the government use the auspices of public health to get across some of the regulations that it has enforced, the masking regulations, the COVID passports, etc. There is an opportunity at committee level, at local government level, to put pressure upwards to national government. I interviewed Gary Sidley today, the psychologist, and he was telling me that there is this insidious trend to keep, for example, masking in place within healthcare settings, and it's almost impossible to get rid of them. And having councillors on the ground engaging in passionate debate and saying why this is simply not appropriate, why it's not appropriate for local hospitals and GP practices, for example, to continue enforcing these regulations that essentially have been dismissed in every other setting, why they continue to be enforced in terms of local health trusts, local GP practices, etc. And it's down to local councillors passionately debating and arguing on the doorstep that they can do something about that. So I would really encourage people to embrace the idea that June was getting across there, that we do not want to have yet more bureaucrats elected. Rather, we want people who are going to implement change and implement change at grassroots level. It's absolutely critical. And there's a great opportunity, I think, to address Nigel's point, to use those arguments on the doorstep.
Great, thank you. So I want to come back to the panel quickly, like literally 30-second answers, and then we're going to go to a video from Niall Crowley, who's got some ideas why he's standing as an independent actually in London. But Nigel's, and you should all see that Nigel's posted in the comments a link to who where to see who's standing, and there's over 2,000 candidates standing, and how to maybe present a shock to the mainstream parties, but also to get people who are independent actually in there. I don't think it's just about getting a shock. It's also about having some people who've got some ideas and taking a stand and have got some views and will put themselves on the line, right? But I'd like to hear from each of you a quick response just to that and to what Jeffrey said, or anything else you've heard on there, but literally 30 seconds. I'm going to start in the opposite direction. So Valerie first, please.
Well, one thing that struck me tonight listening to all the panel is we've all talked about local people. And June just touched about it herself, going out there and working hard for local people working for local people. And in the SDP's case, our candidates are local people who are interested in what's going on locally to them. And that's why I'll underline what Alan said about getting rid of the duopoly and going for these smaller parties, the independents, etc., because they are local people who are interested in local issues. That's how to get change locally.
Great, thank you. Harry Miller, please.
I think it starts off with being honest, and I think it starts off with being honest with your candidates. In all honesty, for instance, this idea of that Reform have of standing, hundreds of candidates. Well, they're only going to sport a tiny little handful of those hundreds of candidates, and I think it's dishonest. And if you can't be honest with your candidates, I don't think you're ever going to be honest with your electorate. I'd just like to take a few more seconds just to address the point made by the SDP lady. I didn't say that we shouldn't work together. I think we absolutely can work together. Mike, the question that I was answering was, should we join together? and I don't think that's possible. Working together, yes. Joining together, no.
Okay, great. Jonathan Tilt, please.
Okay, thanks. I'd just like to slightly controversially challenge the notion that all independents are inherently good, I'm afraid. I mean, we see our role as countering the World Economic Forum COVID status narrative. A lot of independents have done a good job in standing up to that and have done better than the duopoly. But I'm aware locally here in Yorkshire of independent councillors who've pushed that narrative, who've pushed for masks to be kept in place in council buildings, have pushed for things like COVID war memorials, and have pushed that far more than Labour and Conservative councillors. So this notion that every single one of the 1,800 independent councillors is on our side, I'm afraid is flawed. I think a lot of them are, but don't just research your independent councillor before you start voting for them would be my word of warning.
Okay, thank you. Alan Graves, please.
Okay, hold on. Yeah, I'm on there. Okay, well, first of all, I think it's quite sad that Reclaim have been using this platform to pull down both Reform UK and the SDP for actually working together. I think it's a bit sad that they're using this. That's what they're using this platform for. What we need to do is work together. We need to do something better and give people better choices in elections. I remember coming to where I live now, and there was two choices. There was Labour and there was Conservative. And to me, that is not a choice. We need more choices and we need an independent choice. And I think this group that we've got here is one of the best that we can. Now, you talk about with Reclaim's attitude as to not standing local candidates. Well, I would ask you to look at how the Liberal Democrats have got MPs in our country. They've got MPs because they've got a raft of local councillors behind them. That's how you get MPs. So it's very, very important that we get local candidates and councillors around the country so that we can get MPs into Parliament where the voice makes a difference. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Alan. David Kurten, please.
Hi, yeah, I mean, the good thing about local elections is that all our candidates are local, of course, because they have to live in the district or borough that they're standing in. And also what's great about Heritage Party and the candidates we don't have a large number, but they're all really, really enthusiastic because for most of them, it's their first time of ever standing in an election. So they're very excited about getting into politics. And most of them have got into politics and they've said, well, I never, ever thought I'd get involved, but we just got to the point where we're so fed up of what's going on, they had to join a party and get in and try to do something and make a difference. And I think that enthusiasm is just going to rub off on people in the local area who want a change as well. So finally, to answer Nigel's question, how can you help us? Well, do have a look at the Heritage Party website if you do specifically want to help us. A list of candidates is there and where they're standing, and you can click a volunteer button if you want, and you can come and join and help them. Thanks.
Great, thank you. I'm going to remind people what we're saying to our signatories as well in just a second, and then I'm going to come out for some more questions after we see the Niall video. But just June, Mummery, any responses to the questions, please? Anna, can we take June Mummery off, please? Off mute, thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Yeah, I agree with June Slater and Valerie and the gentleman from Reform. You know, local people working with local people, and also the small parties have to unite. Like I said, 186 coastal seats are up for grabs. I will work with any party that cares about our deprived seaside towns. I'm here. The fishermen will back you. But, you know, we just need to join forces and make some kind of change. So, no, that's what I think that we should all be doing and working towards. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Quick, June Slater, I can see you with your hand, and then we're going to go out to Niall's video. Just to say what we're asking our signatories, we're recommending people do, because people are saying in these comments, well, if we've only got Labour and Tory. As it happens, there were Labour, only a few, but there were Labour MPs who did challenge the vaccine mandate, and some that challenged vaccine passports. They're on the record. We also shared who they were. And we said at the time that we would hold people accountable. Now that's MPs, but also with councillors, and we know what if they have stood before or where they stand now. And the 5 questions that we've put forward around where they stand on free speech, where they sit on the mandate and the passport, and where they stand on digital ID now, and where they are on lockdowns. Will they do them again, as the Prime Minister said he would do? These key questions also, and where they are on the cost of living in relationship to lockdowns. I think these questions that we put to them, and email them and phone them up, right? Or if you can go to a hustings, or if there's a meeting in the run-up. We've only got a few days left, but they should hear from us. Everyone should hear from us. They should know that there's vocal voices. That also goes back to Central Party HQ, by the way. And the more that we assert ourselves and have our voices heard and ask questions and make ourselves part of the public discussion, the more likely what we're all concerned about is going to be addressed properly, and we can increase having an impact on that. So June Slater, Anna, if you could take June off mute, please.
Can you hear me? Yeah. What I'd like to do is invite any candidates from small parties or as independents. I've just put a post on UK Politics Uncovered on Facebook, inviting you to put your bio and your details on the thread. I'll pin it to the top of the page. It'll stay there for the next week. That way you have an audience with at least 90,000 people looking at it. That's the actual audience. Obviously the reach is far greater, so you can use that audience between now and then. It's probably a much bigger audience than your own personal pages. It gives you an outlet to at least put your name forward if you're interested.
Thank you, June. That's a great recommendation, and guys can follow that up. So I know that many of you will know that during lockdown, one of the things that's happened is that local traffic local traffic networks have started impacting areas, and Niall Crowley is standing as an independent, and he's done this small video about why he's standing in Hackney, in the ward in Hackney that he's standing, and what he thinks local politics means. And in a way, I think he's really put his finger on the idea of the public and citizens and what could be done. So Anna, if we could play that briefly, please. Just need to get audio.
Is the audio not working for you?
I can't hear anything.
Okay, hang on. I did ask it to play the sound, but one sec. I'll try it again, see if it works. Otherwise, I don't know. It must be the audio.
Otherwise, maybe I'll send. Okay, it's too late to do anything else.
Hang on one sec. I'll try it one more time. Can you tell me if you can hear this?
No.
No?
What we'll do is we'll share it. If we can't do it now, we'll on the comments we'll put a link to it so people can see it subsequently. In a nutshell, Niall was basically saying that even when you have consultation with local councils, they often do not listen to the answers that local residents give, and that's specifically about local low traffic neighbourhoods, LTNs, and the shutting off of streets for people who rely on their own cars. And how pollution is meant to be, one of the aspirations was that it was going to reduce pollution, but often increased as a consequence of it, and the through fares and charging, and what that means in terms of local people having a say. I've got first-hand experience in that because I was very involved in Hackney again, but in other areas as well, where the local council and people who oversaw it put forward a consultation that in the past, and this is really important and why I think people should definitely get out and ask questions and go to hustings and make their voices heard, all of us, and vote, because often very few people vote for councillors. Sometimes as few as 300 or 400 people have voted for them. And as together, we've got at least 200 signatories in each constituency, and in the wards it varies, but we can make a very big impact along with all the independents that are standing on making a shift. My own experience in Hackney was that they'd done consultations before that no one really answered, and they only had a few friends respond to them. But when they started doing it about licensing and nightlife and late night, we had a huge response in Hackney, because Hackney was transformed through nightlife. And it's just indicative that the council was really initially patronising and dismissive and disparaging. And they were like, oh, well, Alan, you'll soon see when all the people demonstrate how much they don't want to have this. And then I'm like, well, that's good, because that's called democracy, right? That's good. So if we hear that everyone in Hackney doesn't want these things, and then what happens is there's 20,000 responses that say they want more dynamic, interesting night and day activities. They still want to have parks and quiet areas, but they want to have a vibrant, dynamic nightlife. And there was a battle, and the council basically still fought against it. And in the end, has still imposed zones and restrictions. But there was a battle, and it was a really important one. And in many ways, it seems to me that like the consultations and the discussions, we can make them about the public. And I think Niall's point was that the only real way you get accountability and you have democracy is if ordinary people do get involved and have their voices heard and stand and vote. So, you know, I know that sometimes people are somewhat cynical about what they think the electoral process can actually do. And we saw it somewhat with even when we were lobbying MPs, people saying, why are you doing that? But we did see significant results, right? We saw an end to vaccine passports in that form. We've obviously got the digital ID question and what that means now. And we saw an end to the mandate, right? They're really important things. And I think similarly with local elections, the more that we can have our voices heard and ask questions and make decisions about who we're backing or stand ourselves, they're all really crucial in terms of getting voices heard. Now, I want to throw, because we're going to be coming towards the end, I want to throw a couple of questions up that people have put in here. One was directed, it was from a Reform supporter, so directed to Alan Graves, but he's got concerns about the big international organisations like the WEF and the WHO, some of the points that, for instance, Jonathan was talking about, but what could be done locally in that context of some of the other impacts that might be coming down the line. And then another question, so that's to Alan, but that can be to everyone as well, right? And then another question that's coming is that the domination by SPAD, special advisors of politicians and polling, and versus the question of the demos, the people, the public, and a relationship with the public. And it seems that what's come from this discussion is everyone seems to be saying it should be about local people and local voices. But surely there's a big gap at the moment still between ordinary people and having our voices heard and what happens at a local level and at a national level. So my question to you guys would be, how much are you going to try and push that more in terms of solutions for ordinary people and to challenge the kind of bureaucratic, technocratic thing that we've seen in the last few years? It hasn't just been under COVID. Obviously, under COVID, it got put on steroids. And how you can see doing that. If there's any more questions, I'm going to ask you to post them because we're time pushed. But I'm going to go back in the opposite order now with people to come up. And if you've got any burning questions, throw them in. Right, starting in the opposite order, if my memory banks work that well. I'm actually going to start with David Kurten first. Just David, any of the questions that have come up and you know, any last comments to people about what they should do come election day between now and then, please. And we need to take you off mute, please. Sorry. Thank you, Anna.
Yeah, great. Thanks. Yeah, question about sort of how the sort of civil service and everything inside the local government and SPADs and all that work. I mean, it is, you know, it's like the deep state in a way. So sometimes it's like walking through treacle. And I know when I was on the London Assembly, sometimes you had to fight with the staff that were there to get your opinion through. And they had an agenda, and that very much went with the sort of, you know, the old parties, the four parties that were there, and you know, they were part of the system already. So you come in new and you have a different opinion, and it's very, very hard to get through that. I mean, local councils and local areas, every one of them will have an Agenda 21 committee, which is committed to pushing through Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, all of the points of the Paris Climate Agreement and the World Economics Forum's program and all this, and that, you know, they're committed to doing this, and they're embedded in local councils, and they're embedded in the departments in Westminster as well, and this is where you have sometimes the special advisors, and they're pushing these things around the sort of ministers that are there and the MPs that are there. So it's this whole thing needs to be broken apart, and the people who are on these committees and committed to outside agents and are not committed to the people and not committed to the democracy and the sort of the people who get elected to do certain things and stand in their way. I mean, they all need to be exposed and they need to go, basically. But it's a really, really big job because it's everywhere and it's now endemic. I don't have a big answer, but just talking about it is the first stage, recognizing it's there, and then you can fight it.
Okay, thank you very much, David Kurten, Heritage Party leader. June, Mummery, some thoughts on this evening to leave us with, and any questions?
Well, I agree with David, and I agree with you all. And then at the end of the day, all we must do is keep talking. You know, we have people like yourself, Alan, together, June Slater, all the different parties, people like myself. I'm pushing the old coastal community and the fishing. Don't let them win. We are getting to them. All of us are pushing, and in the end, the wonderful thing, the truth will prevail. People are listening, and like us, you know, we have social media, this wonderful tool, and that is what I see most days. I've got great support from the great British public. I've got great support from people like all of you yourselves this evening, and it's one of those things, you know. The more you push, and we'll make change, and we'll change politics for good.
Thank you, June. That's Alan Graves. Alan, can we take Alan's unmute? I have a question for you, Alan. I mean, how do you think it's looking? Can you tell, just in Derby and just generally? I've seen different numbers about what people might vote. I mean, I know it's slightly speculative. What's the kind of conversation going on with reform at the moment, as well as anything you want to respond to, of course?
You mean how well are we going to do in the elections?
Yeah.
Well, I'm up for election as it happens on May the 5th, so I'm expecting to win my seat, and one of our other seats is up for election, and that one I'm hoping we're going to win as well. It's looking very, very positive. When I talk on the doorsteps, people are very supportive of our message. And it's because we talk on the doorstep that people are supportive of our message. You have to actually have a personal conversation with people. These sort of forums are okay, but the majority of people don't watch them, don't listen to them. And it's no disrespect to what you're doing, Alan, because I think it's brilliant. But we actually have to go and talk to individuals. The only message I really wanted to put out there is that it's okay having these forums, but unless we get elected members, there's no voice at all, because we're just talking in a vacuum. All right, we're talking in silos. What we need to do, one of the things that I'm particularly pleased with myself about is the fact that I've got elected, and so I have a wider stage. Today I've been interviewed by the ITV and BBC. Had I not been elected, had I not got 17 candidates for the local elections, they wouldn't have entertained talking to me. And I can see people on there that I've known from the past, when they were in the Brexit party, when they were in other particular parties. Unless you had that following, unless you had that election stuff behind you, then they're not going to go and talk to you. That is why we're silent. So what we have to do amongst ourselves is get elected, then we'll get heard. And we start with local councils, and then, as I said earlier, you then build onto the national stage as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Jonathan Till, can we take you off?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think I'm off mute. Yeah, please vote on the 5th of May. The key lies in the 70% of the electorate who don't vote, as David alluded to earlier. Not voting is not an act of resistance, it's an act of submission. It's waving the white flag. They couldn't care less if you don't vote, because their supporters, the establishment party supporters, will go out and vote. And if those that don't oppose the establishment parties don't take the opportunity to vote, the establishment parties will continue to win. So please get out and vote. There aren't enough genuine pro-freedom candidates across the country, so most people won't have the option of voting for Freedom Alliance or one of the other freedom parties that's represented here. We need more candidates in the future, so when these elections come around next year and the year after, please consider being a candidate. It isn't that difficult and it's not that daunting. If you haven't got a genuine pro-freedom candidate standing in your ward, please still go and vote and spoil your ballot paper with some sort of pro-freedom slogan. I mean, Vote Freedom Alliance would be my preferred one, but there's lots of others that are available for you to use. But go and vote and get your vote registered, because that will still get noticed.
Okay, thank you very much, Jonathan. Harry, if we could hear, your thoughts and response to leave us with, please. Anna, can we take Harry off mute, please? Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Harry, yeah, we got you there. Good.
Okay, right. So we will not stand. We will not stand any candidate anywhere that we do not fully support financially, that we do not fully support with a full social media campaign, because we think anything else is dishonest. When it comes to money and local candidates, what I would say is this: you all need candidates. You need to vote for people who understand the value of a pound. They understand that you can only spend it once, that you can't go around spending £78,000 on a police, equality, diversity and inclusion officer, and then have the same £78,000 to spend on potholes and hospitals and all those things. We've got to drive out the waste that there is in our councils. We don't need more money. What we need is to stop the leaks by these lunatics who spend other people's money like it's gone out of fashion. So find somebody who cares and find somebody who understands the cost of a pound. That's what I would say.
Thank you very much, Harry. And Valerie, please. There we go.
Once again, I find myself agreeing with Alan here. We've got to stand. And Alan is absolutely right. Unless we get elected, we're voiceless, totally voiceless. And the way to get elected is to go out there and be active. It's to knock on doors. It's to speak to people. It's to plod those hard yards day in, day out, to get to know the constituents that you're hoping to serve, to understand the issues that face them, and to explain to them what you will do to help them. And it's only through that hard work, and I think Jude Slater sort of remarked about this earlier, that you're going to make progress. It's hard work, it's difficult work, and it's not easy. I mean, I'm from a party that has very few representatives elected at the moment. We're working very hard at it. But one thing we recognise with the SDP is unless we get people elected, we're voiceless. We can have some influence, but we're voiceless. So the answer is vote and persuade people to vote. And that's the way we'll get change. And I get a real sense at the moment, and certainly this meeting expresses that, there's an underlying unhappiness in this country with the duopoly. And we are the people that can start breaking this duopoly up and making some changes for the better for all.
Thank you, Valerie. You know, Daffyd Rees has put a post in here saying that Mark Joford won because he got his votes on the basis of only 50% turnout. If you think about the role and the influence that Mark Joford has had in the lockdowns and the impact on Wales and everything, I mean, it does raise the question that historically low turnouts, for those that are feeling politically homeless, we should go out and have our voices heard and vote and put it to candidates about why they're standing, put pressure on them. And also, you know, I would recommend, if people think that it can be done better, to put themselves forward, right? Take a lead, have a say, go in it. Act together. We're going to keep putting pressure. We're going to act as a pressure group. We're going to act to keep making sure that local and national government hear our voices, and the opposition, that we get into the press and media about key issues around our rights, freedom and democracy and privacy, that we're not going to be sidelined and treated with contempt anymore, and that the most important thing in society is the public. And contrary to the idea that we should be treated with contempt and with disdain and have things done to us or nudged, that the only true way for a democracy is to have engagement, openness, transparency, and discussion and debate, and win hearts and minds openly and honestly. And we're going to keep campaigning and canvassing to make sure that happens. I found it a really interesting, important discussion today. I think that I really want to thank the panel and the guest speakers from the audience for coming in and actually, also not just for speaking tonight, but it's a lot of hard work, right? As people say, and getting out there and doing it. But in many ways, there's no shortcuts, right? Because one of the things is, you can take the view of fatalism, which sometimes people, everyone's a shill, or everyone's involved in this plan, or everyone's, and then in which case you talk yourself out of doing anything, right? It's kind of a convenient fatalistic position, which is that nothing you can ever do is ever going to change it because it's all predestined. Or you can take the view as well that some people do, that is everyone's stupid. You've seen the light, or everyone else is stupid. But that similarly isn't going to change and convince people, right? But I think the thing is, the challenge we've all got is to win hearts and minds of those who are politically homeless, who are looking. How do we find more interesting ways to engage with them, to get to them? That's both at the ballot box, right, with local elections and nationally, and in between that, about how we actually convince them to take a stand themselves a bit more and organise and campaign and pressurise. And that's something we certainly want to do at Together Declaration. Today, we've opened our membership, and I want to thank those that have joined today. We've had a fantastic response. It's been really exciting, and it's going to be an insurance policy for us to be able to continue and to do more work. Obviously, it's been very grueling for a long period of time, and we've only been going as Together since August, but many of us have been volunteering and campaigning for the last couple of years in terms of what's going on and challenging things. So in that spirit, I want to really thank the panel and wish everyone really good luck and congratulations. I mean, I hope that others think this, but I thought it's been very useful. It's also very frustrating because a few of you have touched on this and said it. Obviously, there's a lot to do. And I think that the reality is that it's important what's happening at the ballot box, but there's no excuses for all of us in between that as well. And to get behind and make a decision, if there is someone that's representing the key things that we think are important, get out, vote for them, get other people to vote for them, right? Encourage other people around you in your network to do that. And if there's not, make a big noise about why there's not, and think about what that means as well, and what's missing and what can be done. So I want to say thank you very much to all the panel. Thank you for everyone who's watching on the live stream, as well as the questions that have come on the Zoom this evening. We've got some more panels upcoming. We're going to be doing one on the cost of living, one on the role of the media, both in COVID and ongoing. And there'll be much more. We're going to be doing some more events around the country. So we're looking forward to that. And we're going to carry on making sure that we get the public to be heard, which is what our real kind of key goal is. So thank you very much, everyone. Have a good night and good luck next week. And take June up on her offer as well. Thank you very much. Good night. Remember, we're always
bye. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alan.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Take care.